Welcome to another episode of It Takes Two. I'm your host, Ethan.
And I'm Naomi. Today we're diving into a topic that's been making headlines and is critical to almost every piece of technology we use daily: semiconductor chips.
That's right. And specifically, we're looking at what some are calling the American chip renaissance, the massive push to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to U.S. soil after decades of decline.
It's fascinating how something so tiny has become so geopolitically significant. The U.S. share of global chip production has plummeted from 30% to just 12 over the past 3 decades.
And that decline has real consequences. During the pandemic, we all saw it happened when chip shortages hit, car prices soared, electronics were delayed, and exposed a serious vulnerability in our supply chain.
Especially considering that 90% of the world's most advanced chips are made in Taiwan, which faces constant threats from China. It's no wonder Congress passed the CHIPS Act, allocating over $50 billion to assure production.
Let's start with Micron, the only major U.S.-based memory chip manufacturer. They're making some bold moves right now, aren't they?
Absolutely massive moves. Micron has committed to a $100 billion investment over 20 years to build 4 massive fabrication plants in upstate New York. It's slated to be the biggest U.S. chip project in history.
And they're expanding their headquarters in Boise, Idaho too, right? I read they just broke ground on a new $15 billion fab there.
Yes, and what's striking is the sheer scale of these facilities. The new fab in Boise will be over 600 square feet. And in New York, they're building 4 of those for a total of 4 million square feet.
For context, how much memory does Micron actually produce in the U.S. right now?
Currently, only about 2 of the world's memory chips are made in the U.S., all from Micron's older facility in Manassas, Virginia. With these new investments, that could increase to about 15 of worldwide production.
That's a significant shift, but Micron has been facing some challenges too, especially with China, right?
Yes, in May of last year, China banned some of Micron's products, citing cyber risks. About 25% of Micron's revenue comes from China, and roughly half of that is now at risk.
That seems like a retaliatory move after the U.S. banned certain chip technologies from being exported to China.
Industry analysts certainly think so. One expert described Micron as a pawn in what I consider this 15-year war between China and the U.S. It's classic geopolitical chess.
How is Micron responding to this pressure from China?
They're diversifying geographically. They've started construction on a $75 billion assembly and test facility in India, but they're also maintaining that they remain committed to their Chinese customers.
Let's talk about the technical side for a moment. What kinds of memory chips does Micron make?
Primarily DRAM and NAND. DRAM is dynamic random access memory. It's volatile, meaning it loses information when powered off. But it's very fast and works closely with the CPU. NAND flash is non-volatile memory used in storage devices like SSDs.
And they're also developing advanced memory for AI applications, right?
Yes, their most cutting-edge product is high bandwidth memory, or HBM, which is critical for AI models like ChatGPT. It helps these models remember past conversations and generate more human-like responses.
Let's pivot to another fascinating player in the semiconductor world, RAM. Like companies like Micron. RAM doesn't actually manufacture anything tangible, yet it's become absolutely crucial to the industry.
ARM's business model is so interesting. They design the architecture, essentially the instruction set for processors, then license those designs to companies that make the actual chips.
And they're in virtually everything, right? Their CEO claims that 250 billion ARM-based processors have shipped in their history, with over 30 billion shipping every year.
Almost every smartphone runs on ARM architecture. Their big advantage is power efficiency. ARM chips use less power than traditional x86 chips from Intel and AMD, which is why they've dominated mobile devices.
And now they're breaking into new markets. Apple switched from Intel to their own ARM-based M-series chips for Macs was a huge validation of the ARM's potential beyond smartphones.
Absolutely. In fact, Apple just extended its deal with ARM through 2040. Other companies like Qualcomm are making ARM-based PC processors, and even NVIDIA and AMD are reportedly working on ARM-based PC chips.
ARM just had a massive IPO last September, right? Valued at over $50 billion?
Yes, it was the largest public offering in over 2 years, though the stock has fallen significantly since then. But their positioning for AI is strong, as their CEO says. Every single AI application needs a CPU.
Let's talk about Texas now. It seems like the Lone Star State is becoming the epicenter of American chip manufacturing.
That's right. Texas has a long history with semiconductors. The integrated circuit was invented at Texas Instruments over 60 years ago. Now it's attracting massive new investments from companies like Samsung, Texas Instruments, Infineon, and more.
What makes Texas so attractive for chipmakers?
Several factors. It has abundant land for these massive facilities, business-friendly policies including no state income tax, access to water and power, and a significant talent pool from its universities. The state also just approved its own Texas CHIPS Act, setting aside $1 billion in subsidies.
Let's talk about Samsung's presence there. They've been in Texas since 1990s, right?
Yes, they have a massive fab in Austin that's now fully devoted to making chips for outside customers. And they're building a new $17 billion facility in Taylor, just 30 miles north of Austin, where they plan to make their first advanced chips in the U.S., starting next year.
And Texas Instruments is making an even bigger investment, $30 billion for a new fab in Sherman, north of Dallas.
Right? And that's huge for Sherman, a city of just 0 people. The mayor said their entire city tax base was around $4 billion, so this is transformative for them.
One thing that struck me is the resource requirements for these fabs. The water and power needs are enormous.
They really are. For example, each of TI's new fabs in New York will use 25 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water every day. And those advanced chip etching machines from SNL each consume about 1 megawatt of electricity.
That's a concern in Texas, isn't it? Given their independent power grid that failed during the winter storm in 2020 and ongoing drought issues in parts of the state.
It is, though many chip companies have switched to renewable power sources. Samsung, for instance, says their site runs on 100 green power sources from Texas wind farms, and most fabs recycle the majority of their water.
So, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, do you think this push to reshore chip manufacturing will succeed?
It's going to be challenging. Manufacturing in the U.S. is still at least 20 more expensive than in Asia. But the combination of national security concerns, government incentives, and companies willing to make these massive investments gives me cautious optimism.
The scale of these investments is truly staggering. Micron's $100 billion commitment over 20 years, Samsung's $17 billion fab in Taylor, TI's $30 billion facility in Sherman altogether. Texas alone is seeing over $60 billion in new chip investments.
And it's not just about the facilities themselves. It's creating an entire ecosystem. When Samsung builds a fab, suppliers follow. Global Wafers is spending $5 billion to build America's biggest silicon wafer factory in Sherman, right alongside TI's new facility.
The workforce development aspect is crucial too. All these fabs will need highly skilled workers, which is why companies and states are investing in education pipelines from K-12 for university programs.
That's what advantage New York claims to have for Micron's investment, existing chip expertise from companies like Global Foundries and a SEM school in Syracuse that Micron is supporting.
Let's touch on the current market conditions. The chip industry is cyclical and we're currently in a downturn, right?
Yes. After the pandemic-driven boom and subsequent shortage, we're now seeing an oversupply situation and weakened demand, especially for consumer electronics. Micron had to reduce output and lay off 10 of its workforce in early 2023.
But they're still moving forward with these massive investments, betting on long-term growth from AI, automotive, and other emerging markets.
Exactly. As one industry expert put it, when I look at this market over the past 30 years, it's always feast or famine. We have an oversupply now, but give it a couple of months and we will be in an undersupply.
That cyclical nature makes these long-term investments all the more impressive. These companies are looking decades ahead, not just at the next quarter's earnings.
And they're backed by unprecedented government support. The CHIPS Act represents a significant shift in U.S. industrial policy, a recognition that semiconductors are too strategically important to be left entirely to market forces.
It reminds me of the space race in a way. There's this sense of national purpose around regaining technological leadership.
That's a good analogy. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who championed the CHIPS Act, said something similar. If we didn't get back that edge, we would no longer be the #1 economic power in the world.
Well, we'll be watching closely to see how these investments play out. The future of American chip manufacturing is being written right now in places like Boise, Syracuse, Taylor, and Sherman.
And the implications extend far beyond just the tech industry to national security, geopolitics, and America's position in the global economy. It's a fascinating story that's just beginning to unfold.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us on It Takes Two. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Naomi. See you next time.